Uh, this is a meeting of the Plainfield Planning Commission on Monday, January 5th, 2026. We're all here, the four members, Jesse Cooper, David Checkman, and Karen Story, myself, Luke Hogan. The first item of business, once we're in order, is the approval of the minutes. So could we have a motion to approve the minutes?
And they're the minutes from the 15th.
Yes.
I'm just glancing at it here.
Okay. Well, we can have a motion on the floor.
I'll make the motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now we can let any review or discussion of the minutes.
It looked fine to me.
Yeah,
I neglected to.
I did read it, but it was a couple weeks ago, and I was just trying to remember if anything jumped out about it, but I think it's totally fine.
Okay, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the next item, some changes to the draft. I mailed out a revised version format of the dimensional standards, because as David mentioned, it was a little messy last time. So really what I did was I just, under lot area minimum, I listed it as 1/5 acre with public sewer with options in parentheses, see conditional uses. And which is, the conditional uses are right above it. So how does that look to everybody?
I was a little the I don't know. I did a little bit of research, and I'm a little mystified about the 75 car thing because it seems so.
Well,
It has no point.
before we get on to that, let's just
Oh,
finish
I'm
up on
sorry.
the 1/5 acre,
Oh,
how that looks for the draft to put out. Is it
oh yeah, that looks
comprehensible
fine.
enough?
I'm sorry. I
Okay,
wasn't
okay. So I did
paying
make
attention.
you made, in the minutes, it was suggested there was a double word somewhere in the back, in the beginning of the draft. I made that change. I didn't send out the whole draft. I just sent out this section. So we're going to go with that the way it is. Okay, now we can move on to the other items that we discussed from the last meeting, which were, we wanted to discuss what a traffic impact study was. So I went to the Montpelier zoning, and basically they describe the VTrans threshold, and that's the 70. That's the, if you go to the VTrans website, it talks about 75 cars, essentially rush hour, heavy traffic areas entering to a state highway. That's the threshold that Montpelier is using to do a impact study, other than the standard of not creating too much undue traffic. That's, so they call an impact study a state study. And that's the 75 cars in those hours. That's the state standard, which essentially you would have to meet anyway because it's the state standard. So, I mean, you couldn't really say it should be 60 cars. The state wouldn't, I'm now
Would the state standard apply to non-state
no,
roads?
no, they are
Oh,
only,
for example, it wouldn't apply to Main Street.
no,
In
but
particular.
a gray area might be the Brook Road entrance to the bridge, which is essentially people going on the state. But because the Brook Road is a state aid road, or whatever we determined to be the final resolution of how that gets configured, is a state aid road. A state, well, it's a peak hour on class one road, so it wouldn't be a class one road. So that's the standard. Now I mean, we can, in our subdivision regulations, we could say 75 more trips per hour during 8 a.m. peak hours on Main Street if we wanted to. But if they're going on Main Street, they're going out the Route 2, essentially.
Most likely, or coming from Route 2. I,
Yes, but
Yeah, I just found that the 70, it just seems so out of context because it it would really depend on what were the conditions that the cars were uh entering into. So if it was any given road, it might be perfectly fine at 75 cars, but another road might have already be at a threshold that was where 10 cars would be a problem.
Well, my sense is that's what the traffic study would be for, and the triggering of the traffic study would be if there were a certain number of households being added to the
Oh.
community such that 75 cars would now be traveling, whereas before there were only however many cars used to be
Oh,
there. Then you would do the traffic study to
Oh.
say,
Right,
okay,
right.
where are the problem points?
I
Yeah,
thought
I'll
it was
read this. A
75
traffic
additional
impact study,
cars.
uh, a, a traffic impact study
Well,
prepared
new
by a
trips.
qualified professional
Right.
in accordance with VTran traffic study impacts policies shall be included in any application for a proposed development that is expected to generate 75 or more new trips per AM and PM Class 1 roads, and 50 or more trips during the peak hours on Class 2 or Class 3 roads, which could be, I guess I better look up and see what class two. I think the Brook Road could be a class 2 or 3. But
I mean, the thing I was wondering is what's their factor? Is it one, do you assume one additional car at rush hour per household unit?
probably that, I mean, that's in some ways that's the state standard. We can find out what those standards are. But in
That's
any
what I
case,
mean.
what Montpelier has done, it seems to me, is just mirrored the state requirement as the threshold for requiring the impact, the professional impact study, which, in some ways we don't need it because it would be a state standard. On the other hand, it's clear that our standards meet the state standard and would require
But I
that.
guess I guess what I'm saying, Will, is if our zoning regulations are going to be helpful to people who are considering doing subdivisions, it will be helpful for them to know how many housing units that's actually referring to.
Well, I could look that
So
up.
there was some sort of a traffic study for the East Hill project. It wasn't, they may have called it something else, not a study, I'm not sure. And was done by an engineer, I think Du Bois, and they came up with that the East Hill project would, as it was presented at a certain point, and with the community center, it's kind of early-ish when those kinds of things were still being discussed, and would have been, and I think 40 units or maybe 40 something units. That I think, if my memory serves, they came up with it. It was 30, it would be 39 trips at,
Rush hour,
yeah, I think that's right.
which is basically one car per
That,
unit.
right, which, I kind of buy that.
Yeah.
But what I don't get is that 39 could have, it all depends where they're going. So if a lot of them are going to Main Street at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or they're coming to, that you'd need to know how many, like the study would have to include what's the situation on Main Street.
I mean, my assumption is that is a different study than what this is talking about.
Okay,
You're talking about a study to figure out how many new cars there would be based on households. But I assumed a traffic impact study was, what does it mean for the surrounding roads and community
Right.
for X number of cars to be introduced to that community?
right, that's
That's the
study,
next thing that you're
Right.
asking about.
right, and that study, what their conclusion was, well, at 39 cars, it doesn't meet the threshold for having to do the next step study, like
Right.
what you're talking about.
Right.
But personally, my take when I read that was, well, no, I think if this project was to proceed, that there should be the next step study.
Yeah.
And that would be at only 39 cars, because I think that could have a pretty significant impact. I mean, you probably have a better sense than me because you do it every day,
Mhm.
but sometimes it's kind of crowded.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe there's some stipulations where someone could request a traffic study um, based on attributes of their roads or community. But it does sound like the state has this cutoff so that people can't just ask for a traffic study if
Right.
there's two new cars being introduced. And then someone has to come up with some numbers to decide when it's called for and when it isn't.
Right.
And we can dig into the weeds of how these things get formed. Or I feel like what I hear Will saying is the state has a standard, and looking at Montpelier's, they just adopted the state standard.
I guess what I would add to it then would be, the way it's written now, it's up to the DRB. It's the Development Review Board may request the preparation of a traffic impact opinion or study to identify impacts and mitigation measures, et cetera, et cetera. I think that maybe the 75 car thing would be mandatory, but that at 75 cars, but that the DRB could have the latitude to say, well, in this particular situation, on this road, we think this project merits a study.
Mhm.
I
Well,
think
I mean, that's what it says now. It leaves,
that's what it says now,
that's what
yeah.
it says now.
What I did some pretty
I
quick
have found
research,
it,
and
but I
a
don't.
lot of towns seem to say the 75 cars. Middlesex was the only town that wasn't a big town that I could find, and they have a requirement for a traffic impact analysis. It's very short and simple, but it's a requirement of the um,
Subdivision.
subdivision permit. Yeah.
At any traffic level.
It says traffic, there's a checklist of things that a subdivision applicant has to do. And it says traffic impact analysis, current and proposed traffic volumes, capacities, level of service, proposed improvements. Um, you know, I thought, my thinking was, well, what you said, Jesse, but what if it's a two-lot subdivision on a road that's not going to have a big impact? And I didn't come up with a good answer for that.
Yeah.
How you would handle it.
Other than the discretion of the DRB, but that language that you cited was a little more specific. Because right now, if we're just saying traffic opinion, oh, traffic opinion or traffic study, it doesn't really describe that much, where there were little pieces of information that language provided that we could add to the opinion that would describe the opinion in greater detail. Does that make sense?
I guess. I don't know. I have reservations because I think uh, I mean I'd like there to be at least the kind of statement there is now. I don't have a problem adding the Montpelier type language, but I just I think leaving too much to the discretion of the DRB is dangerous. And that's not really the right word, but and that's not a reference to this DRB. That's a reference to any DRB that might exist. We've had various different collections of people on both the Planning Commission and the DRB, but I didn't come up with something. I had hoped to find something that would have a good example, but I didn't come up with it, so I don't really have a proposal.
Karen, you got your hand up?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, it's good now.
So one of the things I've learned by moving down to Route 2 across from outer space is it's hard to get to get on Route 2 just for my driveway. Coming out of the village,
Boy.
Boy,
I
yeah.
think this threshold because coming out of there, and like even today while I was trying to get down to the Grange or Granary now, because that horrible corner, right? I mean, I'm trying to dodge around the corner, you know, who really knows what's happening in front of you. I just think that the threshold to get on Route 2 coming from downtown Plainfield should be a lot. Would be.
Karen,
You know,
we're having trouble hearing you. I wonder if you want to try calling in.
My phone doesn't work this way. I'll write it in chat. Okay.
Well, we heard that it's pretty hard to get on Route 2 and the 75 threshold might be a little high. That's what I got out of it. Oh, you still there, Karen?
Yes, I'm writing in chat.
Okay.
I thought I had a bad internet connection.
So, David, so Karen's saying lower the threshold to 50 out of the village for a traffic impact study. So that's something that we could do as a town,
Yeah,
as a proposal.
well, I'd be more comfortable with that than 75.
Okay.
I don't, maybe if I don't have a good objective way to know.
I don't either.
So
I don't know how to horse trade numbers
Right.
for incredibly complex things like
Well,
this.
you know, let's put it. I can incorporate the traffic study prepared by a qualified professional, the Montpelier language, but put in the 75, change 75 to 50.
Yeah, and then say or if the DRB requires it. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
right now that we're saying the DRB can have a sort of informal opinion or a true traffic study, and we're now going to define a traffic study as, you know, the threshold of 50 cars or more in the village. Additional, you know, if you know, if this, in some ways it says, well, how do you know there'll be 50 cars? But if there are 40 houses, I think you can say they're going to be 50 cars. And at that point, you would want the traffic study to show the impact over a period of time. So we're setting the limit to, well, we're giving the DRB direction as to when to request a traffic study versus an opinion. And the subdivision regulations would now say that limit is 50 instead of 75, which is a state standard. So we're just giving direction to the DRB so they have a clearer idea of when to ask for that study. I don't think if we get too deep.
Does that mean the DRB can't ask for the study if there's less than 50?
No, you can still ask for it, but we can say if it hits the 50 limit, the traffic study should be done.
Right, okay.
And still have the discretion to have an opinion. So that's, we'll go with that. I mean, we're just going for a hearing. We're not carving it in granite forever.
Right.
We're just tossing out ideas. Okay, I will make that change and incorporate it into the draft. And then the other thing we discussed is how to modify Subdivision plans, once they're sort of submitted to the DRB in the course of the hearing, or have been approved, and what is a minor what is a minor amendment, what is a major amendment? Once again, going to Montpelier, parcel lines can be changed by the administrative officer. In other words, if they want to just change parcel lines within the subdivision, meeting zoning requirements, that doesn't need to go through a whole hearing again. The other criteria that Montpelier provides is the public works director can change where they put pipes and public improvements, because they're doing that as a public service director. And that, in our case, that would be the water and wastewater. Could, if they dig something up, or as they go through this thing, he said, we can't run the pipes here, there's a big rock in the way, whatever. They can change those things without going through a more involved process. That's the two main reasons that I think we could define as minor. Everything else would be legally called de novo, start all over again. Just tossing that out. Any feedback? Karen, probably, when do you decide when is a minor amendment to a subdivision plat that you can approve as zoning administrator versus we need to have a whole DRB hearing again to make this change?
In the case of Plainfield, who's the Director of Public Works?
It would be it would be the road commissioner, and it would be the wastewater,
I'm not wild about that. When we have volunteers doing these jobs, like, to me, that's a job. The first part is fine. That, I assume that's Karen, the parcel line adjustment.
Yeah.
And so the zoning administrator, I assume, if Karen's comfortable with that, that doesn't. But the modifying the design of a public improvement, I would be inclined to think that has to be, and if it's something that had been specified by an engineer, should still be under the purview of the engineer.
Well, I mean, it would be Travis of the waste at the sewer, who runs the sewer plant, and the water department, and it would be the road foreman. They're both town employees, so essentially they're our version of public works directors for employees.
I'm not. I don't want to be obstructive, but I have a hard time with that. It's like, that's not what they know. That's not their area of expertise necessarily. If it was something to do with the everyday roads and wastewater and water systems, yes. But if it's a new project that's beyond the scope of anything they've ever done before, it could be 100-lot subdivision. It could be who knows what all, honestly. We don't know what might be proposed in the future. I'm not sure that the road foreman and wastewater, whatever his title is, are qualified to do that. In my sense would be, if it's something that was specified by a registered engineer, a state-approved engineer, and it's a state-approved plan, that changes to that plan should be approved by the person who did the design. That'd be my sense.
So if we include the language that it's that in conjunction with the Public Works Department and the engineering company designing the proposal agrees with that, that's a minor change.
Yeah, if everybody involved agree, all the officials, the engineer,
Okay,
based on, then I'm more comfortable with it.
okay, then I can work that language in. So the Public Works, well, quote unquote, Public Works directors of Plainfield and the licensed engineering firm involved with the development agree on the change, then it can be adopted as a minor amendment to the
Right.
plan. That's what
Right,
we're,
with this language that the modification would not result in a material change to the approved development.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll incorporate those two things. And I'll send out just the language, just a section of the draft where those languages, where I made the changes. That way you don't have 1,000 copies of the draft. Um, I'll cut that out. Okay. Before we jump in, I'm going to mix the agenda up before we get into the Goddard proposal to discuss changing the new time to 6 p.m. for our meetings in general. And I just didn't hear back from Karen. She had some reservations about that, so I didn't want to make any decisions on that. Karen can just answer in the chat if she's good with 6 p.m. versus 7 p.m. is a permanent change. And then next Monday, our regular meeting is the 19th, and I've got a wedding down here that I got to go to. Do we want to change that? Does Jesse want to run or want to run the Zoom meeting, or do we want to change it to another day like the 20th? Just warn it for that Tuesday.
I mean, I would propose changing it to another day if you were able to be there.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
We lean on you.
Okay, that's fine. Karen's saying she can't do 6 p.m. for the next 2 months, so we'll hold off on that.
Okay.
You want to
Okay.
change the 19th to the 20th. That would be a Tuesday. Any conflicts
I
there?
cannot do that.
Okay.
Or
I
the
think,
21st.
uh,
I could do
how
the
about,
22nd.
yeah, I think Wednesday, I'm not sure I can do. How about the Thursday before? No one wants to do Friday.
I can do that.
What's that?
Thursday the 15th.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Fine for me.
Okay. I got to go look at my calendar on the ball here. Hold on. Okay. Well, I've been done in time for it. Okay, I'm good with the 15th. Karen, if you can chime in on the chat about changing the January 19th to the 15th, just for our regular meeting, just because I got to go to the wedding. And if so, we can go ahead and do that. The other thing I just tossing out, because I had oh, no problem. Okay, we'll go for the Thursday the 15th or what? Yeah. Thinking about, I was talking with Peter Youngbear, just going back and forth a little bit about the creative campus proposal. And he's saying he would have liked to have come to this meeting, but the select board always meets on Monday. Usually there are alternate Mondays, but the select board seems to meet a lot of every Monday. So we may just think about it, having meetings on Tuesdays instead of Mondays. So we can go to the select board meetings and they can come to our meetings if we get involved with this. If we do get involved with this interim zoning, that may be something we want to do short term. But just planting that out there, just think about it, or another day of the week. I mean, we can meet any day we want. We just want to make it regular. And maybe not doing it on Mondays might be better for us. But we don't need to decide that now because we've already got the Thursday meeting dialed in and we're going to go forward with that. And it depends on everybody's schedule. And David and I are going to be on the housing committee, and I'm hoping that meets like the second Wednesday of a month or something. But let's see where that shakes out too, because don't want to, change our whole schedule and it turns
Right.
out. the housing committee is messing everything up. So I'm just tossing that out there because sometimes there are conflicts between, and it would be nice to have a couple of planning commission or one or two planning commission meeting members at the select board, and they would like to come here more often, especially if we get involved in things like the interim zoning proposal, which is the next item on the agenda. And well, David, you weren't on the commission when Liam Murphy proposed this in the fall. He basically gave us the same spiel, and we said, yeah. We're busy. We'll think about it. And then I guess they said, well, you guys are taking too slow. I'm going to write to the select board, and we're going to go interim zoning. And thanks for sending out the statute. I went and looked at that. And, it does say for emergency purposes, and I'm not sure how we can call this an emergency, but we've adopted interim zoning before. There's probably a lot of leeway. Towns do it. The select board could do it. They could take this language and they could bypass us and just do it on their own. They could ask for our opinion. We could come up with our own proposal. There are lots of avenues for this to go forward. The three of us, our reaction to Liam was, yeah, it sounds good. We're not going to be bamboozled. We'll wait. Because, he is asking basically for immunity from zoning.
Right.
Yeah.
At least for 2 years.
No. Oh, yeah, for 2 years, and then, but the chances are it's going to be become permanent. And there are a couple of things. I'm just playing devil's advocate. It is one owner. He does own all the property. The reason all those things are conditional uses in the village is that basically anything that happens in the village that's new is going to have houses on either side. Whether it's on Route 2, the village is mostly residential, and then you're going to put this other item, which is listed under conditional uses, in the middle of a bunch of houses. That means the impact on those houses is significant. We want to give the residents enough input to weigh in on it. How will it pick hours of operation? Do we do this for Positive Pi? All these things. And then, but at Goddard, it's all one property. There really are no neighbors. They're all just renters or the entity itself. So thinking just from Liam, Mike Davidson point of view, I have no neighbors except maybe Karen Buffard and a couple of houses. And they're far enough away, there's not going to be a lot of impact. So why go through all the work of the conditional use? Why don't you just permit what's already there? That's his reference. The other is, we tried to make Goddard part of the village, and we wanted to have the same standards. So how would people feel if we said Goddard's is so special that we don't need to have hearings for conditional uses? In some ways, having a separate zoning district for Goddard makes sense for things like parking. They've got plenty of parking. But there's one thing in there that really struck me as pretty much straight up chutzpah, is that it says no land development needs a subdivision permit or a PUD permit. So essentially, maybe Mike's never going to subdivide, but that seems really crazy.
Yeah.
Agreed. I can't justify that at all.
Yeah, that was their Hail Mary.
Yeah. The other thing I thought just broadly, the concept of carving out Goddard as its own district, I don't have a problem with that. The list, and I think particularly in this the atmosphere that we're in right now, the idea that it should be that it shouldn't be too onerous for them to do things that are historic uses of the property. I buy that up to some point. But the list of stuff that would not require any permit at all was I thought, just commercial uses and businesses. So that would allow anything to spring up on campus that um, struck Mike's fancy. And then, yes, it's interim, but who knows where that's going to lead. And right now I have a kind of a good impression of Mike. I've talked to him. I talked to Chris Gruen and all that. And, they seem genuine, but it may not always be Mike and Chris Gruen. So I definitely, I wouldn't mind if a lot of the stuff they wanted to do was permitted use as opposed to conditional use. But that they're not going to be happy with that either because they want to be in a situation where nobody can appeal. That's their ultimate goal, or one of their ultimate goals. And I thought he made that pretty clear, and I'm not sure that's reasonable. And I'm not sure that if the select board was to go for that it's fair to people in town. At the meeting, the thing came up about the Risley's Boardmans and them having to get a conditional use permit for opening another garage. I wouldn't feel comfortable if a business like that had to go through a process, but Ed Goddard didn't. That seems like just asking for people to be resentful.
That is the absolute truth. I mean, you have to I think Liam Murphy's only justification is that these conditional uses were already existing on the campus. So they were pre-existing. And I think I'd like to hear Karen a little bit on the Risley Boardman garage because the use goes on in a building. And then it lapses for a period of time, like a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's basically starting all over again, which is for the, if you were buying that garage and you think, well, it's been a garage before, I can just open a garage. It's not so simple. You have to pay more money, do this thing. It's a little bit of a difficulty. But one thing Ms. Liam Murphy said is if it's existed on the campus anywhere in any building, it's good in anywhere on any building on the campus,
Yeah.
which is kind of like, I mean, it's going past go collecting $200 and the get out of jail card free, and I think having boardwalk on Park Avenue right up, So
and at any level too. That's the part. One of the things. That seems like just going too far. The list of things that would not need a permit. There's nothing wrong with the list. I would probably be able to go along with it in some way, but there's nothing that quantifies it or like it was the commercial uses and businesses that really stood out to me. If they said restaurants and bar, okay, that kind of makes some sense. But saying all commercial uses and businesses is like, that could be anything. They're essentially saying we want to be able to do anything. I'm not sure there's what wouldn't be allowable.
Well, yeah, it's basically, they want to be immune from the zoning regulations. So Karen has written about the Risleys. And that's, I mean, what she writes is absolutely true. It's, if you're closed for a year or more, you have to get a new permit and it's a conditional use. And, that's just the way it is. The trouble is people don't know that, and it shouldn't be that hard a problem because, okay, I need a conditional use. I got to pay the fee for the hearing. The hearing comes up at the next DRB meeting or the one after that, and then you get the permit. Of course, he's already opened the business and running, fixing cars, and that's how you get into these issues. Um, Karen did send out the table of Goddard College campus buildings. Now we sat down with Sandy Vitzum and Mike Davidson and went through a list of all the buildings on the campus, what their uses are, what their planned uses are, which ones are permitted, which ones are conditional uses. Karen was gonna deal with the permits for the permitted ones, and we were gonna set a DRB hearing for all the conditional uses so that every building on the campus would be permitted for its current use, which is basically what the interim zoning would do. It would have all those permits in place, and if they need to change it, they can change it. And Karen is now saying he needed me to sign papers saying that the business met zoning requirements, and she couldn't sign that because it doesn't meet the zoning requirements, because what's grandfathered, it was out of business. I mean, how long was it not a garage? 5 years? A long time. At least 3 years, I think. I can't remember. I couldn't tell you not. But the whole Risley garage conditional use permit debacle is based on this continuity of a zoning permit for the use of the building. Buildings complies with zoning, but zoning deals with uses, and the use of the garage lapsed. So they needed to get a new permit. And that's what our zoning says. And I think that's state law, that once a zoning use lapses for a period of time, it's gone and you have to reapply. Now, maybe we could get around that by saying if the building comes back with the same use, with the same hours of operation, and there's no change for what was happening some period time ago, that would just need a permit versus a conditional use. It's the conditional use, the hearing, the appeals, the whole open DRB hearing that is the issue.
Can you kind of refresh me on what like oversight exists if these were changed to permitted uses rather than conditional uses? Because there's still some room for appeal there, right?
Well, if it's a conditional use, one of our listed conditional uses, you go for the DRB and you have to explain what that use is.
Well, no, I'm saying if we if we change the conditional uses to permitted uses on
Yes.
Goddard, what opportunity for community conversation and potential contesting of a permit exists?
None.
Is it just signing a piece of paper and then you move on?
Yep.
No, it could be appealed still.
What was that?
A permit, you get a permit, it's posted. Karen probably knows, I think there's 15 days.
Yes.
It can be appealed.
Yes.
And then the appeal goes to I checked on this today because I had the same question. Then this is the AI version, so it may not be exactly right. Plainfield, but they said 15 days, and then it might go to the DRB, and then if it gets appealed, if the DRB approves it, it can get appealed again. Then it goes to environmental court, and and it starts to be a lot of time. So it doesn't fully solve what they're worried about, which is delays in the project.
Well, yeah, they don't want they don't want a zoning permit at all.
Right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons is because they don't want anything that's appealable, that's
Right.
going to take time to deal with. And they may be looking at the history of the wood chip plant. I don't know.
Absolutely, I would be. I mean,
Yeah,
there's some there.
yeah, for
I
sure,
mean, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to worry about.
yeah,
I mean, I'm kind of, as I think about this, I'm trying to think about what kind of ways could, I mean, I think generally we want to support them being able to develop this property and not create a situation where they get stymied in doing whatever they want to do for one reason or another. Is there, are we, is there some sort of in between here where we can still be able to put some backstops or sort of circuit breakers in place for um, are there some ways to like simplify the process for them that really recognize the town's need for them to get things up and running on this property?
At this point, I'm gonna go with Peter's advice is that we need legal advice. If we're gonna go down this road where we have this sort of, we're between two sets of standards.
I'm
We don't
sure
want
Liam Murphy
to
would
just,
give us advice.
what's that?
I'm sure Liam Murphy would give us advice.
He would give us plenty of legal advice, and we need somebody to give us different legal advice.
I
So,
mean, I feel the same as Jesse that, by and large, I'm supportive of what's been going on there. And when I look at Karen's table, which is or all of yours table, it's, I don't see anything that rings any alarm bells. The only thing I've heard that rang some alarm bells was that Mike wants a 5,000 seat outdoor amphitheater for music festivals. That seemed like, well, we have to talk about that a little bit.
well, I mean, here's the thing. So I told I told Peter, Black Sabbath played at Goddard, so they should be able to come back, except Ozzy Osbourne won't. But the tribute band can play right next to the wood chip
But
plant.
by
What could
and
be the
large,
problem?
I think Goddard is Plainfield's, it's something Plainfield has that not every town has, and it can be an economic driver and create a lot of jobs. And, it's already starting to do that a little bit. And, it's investing a ton of money. And the table doesn't show anything that I'm wildly worried about. But but the no permit it's a little much.
No permits is a little not, and no subdivision, no PRD is a little
Yeah,
much.
that's
But and Karen says there's a hearing on January 14th for the studies building to become a lodge that would give us some indication of how that process works.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I wonder whether it's legal input we need or Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission because they might be able to weigh in on it.
Yeah, I think at this point we're really breaking into not kind of new ground. I can ask them, but Peter was pretty clear that we may want to have legal counsel specifically for this because it's one of a kind, and Liam is if Liam could easily come on our side and argue the opposite side of everything, so. I'll ask the Regional Planning Commission. I'm going to ask Peter, to get some funds to hire or if he knows of anybody. But if we're going to pursue this separate zoning district for Goddard that has advantages for Goddard and try to simplify the conditional use process, we still want them to get permits, I think. I think the town has an interest in knowing we have this chart,
Yeah.
we know what the buildings are.
Totally.
The carte blanche is a little much.
And there's
Agreed.
a lot of tax implications. I mean, the town has to know what's going on there.
Well, yeah,
Goddard already got a sweetheart deal on taxes because the campus is worth a lot more than 3.5 million.
well,
That's
it's
fine. I think that was an appropriate way to deal with it for now. But
right.
as they make improvements and have, it's ongoing, the campus looks, way better than it did before. The buildings are some of them are starting to be in better shape. They're making renovations. The town has to tax them accordingly.
And they will, and that's one reason is you build your tax, you decide how to look for improvements on buildings based on building permits.
Yeah.
So that, chart of what's going on there directly impacts how they're going to be taxed. Yeah, the freedom from permits is not particularly good.
I think the good thing is that I don't believe they want an adversarial position with the town. I think they're asking for the moon, but I think they probably, I got the idea at the end of the meeting that they all knew that there was going to be a negotiation and that they weren't going to get carte blanche for everything they wanted. And, my hope is that it can stay, uh, there's a lot of mutual advantage for them and for the town for things to stay on an even keel and, they're going to be involved in housing and I'm delighted that Chris Grun's on the housing committee and, uh, so hopefully we can figure out a way to, keep them happy, but not give them, the world.
Yeah.
Okay. So as a group, we like the idea of Goddard having some benefits from the town, but we're cautious of what they're asking for in this proposal. Do we want to follow up on the proposal of a separate zoning district that has yet to be determined, slightly different criteria than if it was just a town, because it is a single property owner? That does create different circumstances than the same thing happening with multiple property owners, specifically in a village residential area. So I'll
I
talk.
think that makes sense.
Okay, I think there's validity to it, so let's keep pursuing it.
Yeah.
Okay, Karen, you want to chime in one more time? And she said the listers rely on permits to know what's going on. The town needs to know what's going on. If we just make this proposal, they basically just go off and do whatever they want. The town's barely involved in it.
Yep.
And we don't want that to happen. So Karen, just before we close off, just chime in a few more thoughts. So you don't want to see a separate district. Try your microphone again. Maybe the bandwidth is opened up.
I ran as easy, less. I can't ran as much when I'm typing. The really big thing is when we create something different in it, it's an unfair. In some ways, it's unfair, and it makes the zoning administrators' job harder when you're trying to get people to get into compliance when they can point over to such and such a place and say, well, blah, blah, blah. So even keel works a lot better for me as a zoning administrator.
So to stay with our original concept of the campus is now in the town, it gets treated like everything else in the town. And how far along have you gotten with issuing the permits for the agreed upon uses on the chart, and how far along is the conditional? We came up with a list of the batch of conditional uses that they agreed to, and can the DRB do a sort of a batch of conditional uses for what is listed on the spreadsheet?
So Mike backpedaled, right? Because he was going to do that, and he's not doing it, right? So he had Liam come back or whoever to do this interim to the select board because they don't like what I'm saying or what we're saying,
Oh,
And so
okay.
for some reason, Daniel Kitchen took it upon himself to fill out this application. And I talked to Mike Davidson on an email, and he approved it to go forward. But I think that was just short-sighted on his part. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this particular conditional use hearing.
Because if he had filled out the conditional use, if he went ahead with our theory that we came up with, permitted uses get permits, conditional uses get one conditional use hearing, get those done, then he would have already had the conditional use for this project that Daniel Kitchen is doing. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but for some reason, Daniel Kitchen felt compelled that he had to fill out this application. And I said, well, has Mike approved it? And then Mike approved it. So I had written an email to Mike saying, like, what about the process we were going to do before? And then he wrote that Liam was going to do some proposal to the town.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this one for the studies building just kind of like slid in because, you know, Daniel Kitchen felt possessed, and Mike Davis wasn't paying attention.
Well,
Okay.
and as people who have built things in the past, if you're looking to get a job and you can get a permit process moving faster, you're more likely to get that job. I'm sure that's why Dan would have done that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
or he wants to get started.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it wants to work.
He's been working down there.
So here's my take on it, is that Karen, Sandy, Mike, and I met. We had a whole process. We had it going. Things were great. And for some reason, that didn't get followed through with Mike, which is kind of modus operandi with Mike. And then he said, Liam comes up and says, well, let's just bypass this process that's underway and come up with the idea I had before, which is to make this zoning district free of zoning. And that sounded good. So maybe at this point, we don't want to pursue.
So I'm curious, the table, if say that process continued and
it should be done by now.
There's not a lot of detail there. So, it just says, or I'll take studies as an example. It just says lodging and a laundry. So would that be all that was necessary? In other words, was the concept that it was kind of a general sense of what was going to happen as opposed to specific?
It was going to be, yeah. Well, the other thing is the DRB could ask at this hearing, what are the parameters for this lodging? And they would say 50 units.
Right. So if everything was being done at once, there would presumably be a bunch of questions that got asked. But there's no, it's not like a subdivision. There's not the
design review.
Yeah, all that
actual plan.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there would be, as Karen said, during this condition, some of them would be simple and some of them would be more complex. But I think the reason why Mike didn't pursue it further is because he didn't want to limit himself. Right. He doesn't want to say, but the building is the building. How many units could you look at the Plainfield Inn? He bought it. How many units does he put in? He could put in 18, 15, 13, whatever that number is. But he's not going to put in 32. He's not going to put in 2.
Right.
You would sit in parameters, and even then you could, if you wanted to put in 19 for some reason.
It seems like it would have been to their advantage to follow through with that process, because even if things changed a little bit, that might be then, it would make it easier if it was already approved that there was going to be X amount of rooms and studies or hotel rooms or whatever, right. and they added one.
Right.
It's unlikely that would trigger a big deal. You never know.
That's what we thought. That was what we thinking, and we were talking, and Mike was throwing out the auditorium, the event, the concert thing, and going all over the way he does. But basically, here are your buildings. They stay within the envelopes. I mean, there's a maximum amount of things you could do with them. How many, and how big could the laundromat be? It wouldn't be a big deal. And to me, it seemed like a pretty good compromise.
Yeah,
So maybe what we want to do before we go on to the separate zoning thing is just follow up with this. I mean, it would mean that we could write a letter to we could start a communication with the select board saying, this is how we feel. We feel like we want to work with them. We have a proposal that is underway that should be, that we'd like to see followed through, where all the buildings are permitted for permitted uses and conditional uses. They're in place. And then maybe we could look at some separate zoning thing at some point, but we have a method in place that's already underway that we want to follow through. And the select board says, okay, we'll do that. And we write Liam, I'll write Liam a letter saying, this is the process we had started. I mean, I don't want to speak, I will review the letter. How about that? That we don't feel the need to create a separate zoning that makes Goddard immune from any zoning oversight for the, which essentially you're asking for. We want to keep oversight, we want to inventory of the building, meeting zoning requirements, knowing that things like parking and sewer usage are different because they have a sewer permit for the buildings, and they're still obligated to meet all state health and safety and fire codes. We don't want to deal with that anyway. We just have our limited zoning thing and have that discussion.
Yep.
We should
That
come
makes
back to
sense
the
to me.
proposal. We should let the select board know what we're thinking. And then we should let Liam and Mike Davidson know what we're thinking.
yeah.
Is that
And
what we're
are
thinking?
so are we simultaneously seeking some legal advice on this, or are we kind of
No, let's wait, because the legal advice would be if we wanted to pursue this separate zoning
Yeah.
district. But we've already set in place this procedure of compliance with the zoning, with the chart. That's perfectly legitimate. I don't think we need advice on that as much as having it followed through.
Will, I had one question about the adaptive reuse amendment
Mhm.
that was with the July amendments, and wasn't that, did that come directly from the Green Mountain College?
Yes, that language.
Which was what Liam Murphy was using as an example.
I think, we took that language of adaptive reuse, but Liam, he said he was fine with that language, except for the conditional use language at the end.
Right.
So
It just seemed like he made another step in the direction.
seems like I should really call the Castleton zoning administrator and talk with them and see what, how, because see how it's working with them. That's where the language came from. That was the sort of analog of what to do with a campus that got sold and is now private. It might be worth a phone call and saying, how's that working out for you?
I'm still, I mean, not to reopen this, but I'm still baffled at what adaptive reuse even means in the context of permitting. I understand what it means architecturally.
Mhm.
I have no idea what additional leeway is being granted by that adaptive use language.
I think it means you can use the building for anything in the zoning, that you don't have to rebuild the building. If Kilpatrick wanted to be hotel rooms, or the Hay Barn wanted to be a hospital, a healthcare center, something, you can reuse that building to new uses. But it has,
As opposed to being restricted to the original use only.
yeah,
Well, why would anyone do that? That's the whole purpose of a zoning permit, to change a use.
yeah, but well, I think the purpose is that if the hay barn could be anything.
Once but if it gets a permit to do it.
Yes, yeah.
That's my point. I don't
Yeah, I
understand.
suppose, I mean, in the strictest sense, it's kind of redundant.
Yeah.
So what is the special quality of that the Riesle's garage could be a dance hall?
If they applied for use permit
Yeah,
or a change of
yeah,
use,
yeah.
which they could do anyway.
Well, except that I think in some uses, it wouldn't be compatible with the building design. I'm having trouble thinking of turning that design building into apartments or hotel rooms, but that's me.
Yeah.
Lack of vision.
Huh.
So in some ways, you're right. In a strict sense, you could go ahead and do it. You could turn the Riesle's. Yeah, as Karen says, it also has to do with old barns becoming apartment buildings.
Mhm.
So
But okay. I'm
yeah,
it's still a different use that is either permitted or conditionally permitted in that
right,
zone.
right,
So then
right.
I'm still just like, I cannot see what is material different about any other permit for a building changing use.
I'll have to think about that. Okay. I know the adaptive reuse was, and it started with a way to change barns, old farm buildings, rather than let them fall apart, to adapt them to new uses
Yeah.
that are not initially compatible with old use or the configuration of the building. But it's in there now. We don't want to take it out. And so how about we table the separate zone? Karen's not in favor of it from an administrative point of view, and I can see that point of view. I'll contact the select board through Peter, who was concerned about this. Tell him that maybe we should make a motion to make this a little formal so everybody's on board, that the planning commission will instead of pursuing the separate district for Goddard for the time being, wants to follow through the initial zoning compliance procedure that was developed with the zoning administrator, and work with Goddard to find if that process could work. That's a motion. Good thing it's recorded, because I can write it down. But I think we all know what we're talking. So we have a second for that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we want to, I
okay.
guess I want to make sure that in passing this, there's also, and I don't know that this needs to go into this motion, but that we somehow answer their request to consider the alternate zoning, because it sounds like we're essentially saying we don't want to do that, we want to do this. Do we want to encourage them in any way to come back with some adjustments to that proposal, or say we would review it down the road pending going through this process?
Yeah, I think we do, but the first step is we want to pursue this process with a dialogue with so we'll amend it to a dialogue with the Creative Campus, along with discussions about other options. Because don't forget, Karen's not big on that separate.
It seems to me that we want to say this is gonna this is this. We want to tell the select, we want to advise the select board and inform Goddard. And hopefully that we advise the select board and they agree, and then inform Goddard that this is not going to be something that's going to happen in a week or a month. This is going to take this is, we're not, we're not, reading this proposal and saying, oh yeah, this is great, we're going to do this. We're seeing a lot of things that need further discussion and clarification, and there was an ongoing process that is within the regulations that we have now. And in the meantime, we advise continuing with that process because it could expedite projects for them. Because, I think the select board has to consider this pretty carefully. And the select board's going to change in a couple of months too. And I don't know what that change is going to entail but so I think I think we want to say, slow down, we hear you, but we have something going and it's to your advantage to keep going with it.
Right, Karen just wrote that they could come in with all the permitted uses and have that done in 30 to 45 days, and probably a lot of the conditional uses. Because once that hearing process starts with the DRB can say, we'll grant these, and these. These two, we want a little more information on, and so 90% of the stuff could be done in a month, 6 weeks, if they were willing.
Somebody doesn't object.
I mean, they're not going to object to like the cafeteria, or
I don't know. You never
know. You never know.
People have,
But we don't want.
they have bones to pick, and
Sure.
I don't know where Karen Bouffard is these days.
Yeah, I don't either. But we sure don't want to just say, go ahead and do what you want. We're not going to worry about it. That's
People across the street or whatever.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so so the motion is general, but it's to advise the select board to continue the process, and follow through with that, with a dialogue with the Creative Campus staff. That's the motion. We had some discussions. All those in favor of following
Sorry,
through?
Will, I lost what the actual motion ended up being.
That we're going to connect with the select board, advise them that we don't want to pursue the interim zoning proposal right now. We want to pursue the process that has already been started, and communicate with the Creative Campus on that.
Okay.
That's a start.
Yep.
Okay. So all those in favor of that?
Aye.
Right.
Okay, I got Karen. So that's the process we'll have moving forward. We'll table the separate zoning. We'll follow through with the procedure we started, and I'll make a couple phone calls with the Regional Planning Commission. I'll call the zoning administrator in Castle and the Green Mountain say, and I'll send an email to the select board, and then I'll write a draft of a letter to Liam and Mike, saying, this is where we are. I'll email that out. We can edit that outside the meeting because we just discussed the content, and then I'll send that. How's that sound?
Great.
Yep.
I think we'll be busy.
What's
So
that?
Next meeting is the 15th at 7. That works
Yep.
for everybody. Okay. Well, thanks everybody.
All right. Thanks, Will.
Okay.
Thanks for.
Yep. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye, Karen.